Welcome to the Health Fix podcast, where health junkies get their weekly fix of tips, tools, and techniques to have limitless energy, sharp minds, and fit physiques for life. Hey, health junkies. On this episode of the Health Fix podcast, I'm interviewing Dawson Church. He is the founder of EFTuniverse.com. What the heck is EFT? Emotional freedom technique. Maybe you've heard of it, maybe not. It's really kind of associated with this thing called tapping. And oh my goodness, I have been tapping for about a year now, and really in the last couple months really started to see the benefits for myself, but also for my patients and clients that I've recommended it to. And so Dawson, he's done a lot of research on emotional freedom technique. He's an integrative health researcher, and he's also an award-winning author who's got quite a few different books, but The Genie in Your Genes has been one of his most popular books. And today, he and I are going to be talking about the benefits of tapping, the benefits that you can have for your mood, the benefits you can have from literally negative beliefs. So things of that nature. You can rewire your brain with tapping. You can also work on emotional eating, stress eating, overeating, all these different things. And there's research behind this stuff. It's not just woo-woo. I mean, I'll be honest. I thought back in the day, because Dawson's been around since 2010 with the EFT universe. And, back then when I was in practice, I was like, I don't know, this stuff's kind of different. It's kind of weird. But honestly, I've seen some really great stuff with my clients, and especially with myself. It's really changed my mindset around a lot of things and helped me to really rediscover myself. Now, he has something called an eco meditation where it kind of combines EFT with meditation, which is pretty cool. And after our podcast, I tried it for an entire month, and oh my gosh, amazing stuff. So I've talked enough. Let's introduce you to Dawson Church and the amazing world of EFT. Hey, health junkies. I have Dawson Church on, and we're going to be talking about, of course, my favorite topic of EFT. You've heard me saying a lot about it. If you're reading my newsletters, you see it all the time on repeat. And if you're watching Instagram, you see me talk about it as well. So, Dawson, welcome to the Health Fix podcast.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, of course, what brought me to EFT, and my folks have heard me say it over and over again, meditation was just so hard for me. I would create lists of everything I had to do that day, or I'd fall asleep. It was one or the other, and I got nothing done. Nothing. And so clearly you found this as well, because I saw that wording there on your website. Tell us how you came to EFT and how you, just tell us the whole story. Give us your background.
Well, I came to EFT really, but as a skeptic. I had a friend who was a Gestalt therapist, and I'd been doing a lot of Gestalt trainings in the 1990s. It's a fantastic therapy method, but we made progress with our clients, but slowly. And so I heard this Gestalt therapist friend of mine say, hey, I'm using this new method. It involves tapping on acupressure points, and I'm seeing people get better from phobias and from PTSD and from chemical sensitivities and from fear of public speaking and sports. And I was like, that sounds too good to be true.
Right. I thought the same. I honestly thought the same. However, of course, I have the acupuncture background too, but I was like, could it be? Could it be? So what happened? What was that?
Well, you gave me a single piece of paper. And right now, like, for example, I have the EFT manual and also the free EFT mini manual. And those have been downloaded over 3 million times on our website over the last 15 years. So tons of people have those. On the back, there's EFT on a page. And he gave me a piece of paper with 1-page instructions for EFT. And I thought, this is too crazy. So I threw it in a slush pile and thought, I don't care. And then a few weeks later, I was really anxious because I was selling a building I owned, and the escrow was falling apart. And I was really nervous about the escrow falling through. And at that moment, as I was just pacing nervously in my office, that piece of paper caught my eye, and I thought, I'm going to try this crazy thing of tapping on acupressure points. And my anxiety went down by 50%. I was like, wow, that's amazing. So we had to talk to other therapists, and I'm not a therapist myself, but I have a lot of therapist friends. I'm in that space. And so talked to other people. They were having a lot of good results with EFT. And then I heard people talking about treating Vietnam veterans, and they were working with Vietnam veterans, and then veterans started coming back from Afghanistan and Iraq with PTSD. And there was a lot of buzz in psychology back then about we're using acupressure points on these people with PTSD, and their flashbacks are going away, and their nightmares are going away. So I then thought, we got to study this. We actually got to have clinical trials of this. Who can do those? And just nobody had any kind of system or vision for doing that. So I began to retrain myself as a researcher, raise money, put together clinical trials, and eventually began to do the first studies of EFT. And when I got the results back from the very first PTSD, it was just a pilot study. I looked at the numbers, and I looked at the drops in flashbacks and nightmares and intrusive thoughts and hypervigilance among these PTSD patients, Jannine, and I was like, whoa, those numbers are just amazing. And after that, that kickstarted me into a really full-fledged commitment to getting the research out there.
That's really important, that you say that, because I think for a lot of people, we're very now prone to be like, I want to know the data. I want to see the data. I want to see really, does this work? And guys, I was looking at his research tab on the website at EFT Universe, and I was like, oh my gosh, there's so many research studies. And I'm a geek at heart, but I wasn't looking at EFT for things. I was looking, supplements and vitamins and health, other things. And I can't believe I missed all that. So here you guys are helping us out here, and I'm glad to see it. So, with all the research, I mean, are you doing anything right now? Are you guys currently doing any new studies, or do you have groundwork folks doing stuff for you guys at this point?
Yeah, I'm doing some new research. And so I spent about 10 years really focused on PTSD because I wanted to apply EFT to a big social problem. And the big social problem is that over 2 million Americans served in Iraq and Afghanistan. And if we look at Vietnam veterans, about a third of them develop PTSD, and about the same percentage of people from those Middle Eastern wars have developed PTSD. And I thought we've got to find a way of applying this in a socially visible way. And PTSD was a way to do it. So I spent about 10 years doing that. Then we noticed that we were getting a ton of traffic to another. So EFT is so different because you aren't doing psychotherapy. You aren't developing insight. All you're doing is having people tell you the bad stuff in their lives while they tap. Yeah. And it struck me that, psychotherapy has been so focused on the mind and on the talking cure from Freud onward. And here we have people just talking and tapping, and then they're losing all of those characteristics, anxiety, depression, of traumatic stress. So I then was able to, I said to myself, how can we apply the same model to meditation? And so I developed a method called ECO meditation, where it's basically the EFT of meditation, because you breathe in a certain rhythm, you slow yourself down, you relax certain muscles. It's all physical, and you do tapping as well. And we found that people did this simple physical method, and boom, they were in an alert but relaxed state. And so we then began to do studies of that. So we found that it has about the same effects as EFT in terms of anxiety and depression and physical health. And so we then moved into doing more physiological research, immunoglobulins, cortisol, neurotransmitters, brain waves, brain function MRIs, and we found that both eco meditation and EFT had these dramatic effects on the way your brain functions. I remember one woman we were at a big conference in France, and we had an EEG display like in a 20-foot high screen behind her. So she was hooked up to electrodes, and she was talking about childhood trauma. And when she did, all of her brain waves of panic and just being totally stressed just shot out in both her left and right hemispheres. Huge amounts of this brainwave called beta, the stress brainwave. As she tapped, it was amazing to watch how those brain waves just contracted, got smaller and smaller and smaller. And other waves like alpha and theta and delta, characteristic of relaxation, began to expand. And by the end of the session, she was just sitting there looking very much the same. Her brain was functioning differently. So we did a lot of physiological research. And then I then began to say, okay, taking away these things that bother people, anxiety, depression, PTSD, is good. But it's only half the picture, because, I mean, that's like, you've dug yourself out of the hole. Now you're standing on this flat plane, but there's a mountain up there. how do we go and ascend the mountain? And that's peak states. That's meditation. That's moving into a relationship with something larger than yourself, what the mystics talk about. So I began to study happiness first, and then I've now done a batch of studies on flow states and transcendent states, both with EFT and with eco meditation. And people, well, I mean, I'll just give you one statistic from one recently published study. This is published just about 2 months ago in the biggest psychology journal in the world, the most read psychology journal. And we found in that study that people doing eco meditation, after just a few experiences of it, their level of transcendence, getting to those elevated states, rose by 73%. 73% of people reached transcendent states when they began to do eco meditation after just a few tries. When we looked at them again 6 months later, 71% of them were still in that transcendent state. So it's producing long-term changes in their sense of perspective on life and their transcendence. And so that's what I'm doing now. And then the very, very newest batch of studies, which will be published like between, like maybe late this year and the next few years, says, okay, when we got to those states, we know the mystics went there. We know St. Francis went there. You read Rumi, and it's just like this human being was in these elevated states. We know that St. Teresa and St. Catherine and all of these writers we read from both ancient scriptures and modern mystics go there. But we're asking now the research question, what does that do to their everyday life? And how productive are they? How productive are they in their family, in their workplace? What's the level of burnout? All these questions. So we're finding now that the people who do this have enormous leaps upward in productivity. They become, in one study we're publishing soon, 20% more productive. So
Wow.
after a month, they're 20% more productive. In 6 months, they're 26% more productive. That means they're getting done now in 3 days what used to take them 4. And it's just an amazing picture we're now building of both these elevated states. And then you come down, you ground yourself, you get to work, you're with your kids, or your parents, or your coworkers, or your team, or whatever it is you do in life, and you're 26% more productive. So that's the other good news, is that these aren't just good feeling states where you feel better. They are states where you're much more productive, much more creative, and you're much better at solving complex problems. That's kind of the trajectory of research that I'm doing right now.
Oh my goodness. I mean, I don't think I know anybody on this earth that wouldn't like to be more productive. I mean, obviously for all of us, that's a huge thing. And I've been working, now with EFT probably about 6 weeks solid. I'm still a fairly newbie in this department, and the productivity is improving. While I still have little blips along the way. I would love to see my brain though. And this is something that I noticed on the website. So I was excited that you mentioned the research, and especially the MRI, because I think for a lot of people, like, going back to your first statement about being pretty skeptic about it, how does this stuff work? Is it really going to help me? I think a lot of people, if they can see the change in the MRI of the brain, I mean, that can give them a lot of sense of, oh, this stuff might actually work.
Yes.
Work.
And cortisol too, brain stuff, cortisol studies. And so those are showing them that these are producing measurable physiological benefits in your body.
Wow. So I want to talk about transcendence for a second, because I think a lot of people might not be 100% sure what that means or what that even feels like as a whole. Will you explain that a little bit more? And then I want to dive into a little bit more on eco meditation and how the breathing mixes with the
Yes.
EFT.
Yeah. So in 1938, Harvard University started a research program with the incoming freshman class. And they gave them a large comprehensive battery of tests, and then tested them in 1939 and onward, and kept on going. Then they got married and they had kids, and then they began to test the kids. Then they had grandkids, they began to test the grandkids. So now this is called the Harvard Adult Development Project. It's been going on for, it's approaching like 80 years, getting a long time. And this has helped produce a picture of what adult development looks like. How do we mature? What are the stages of maturation? What does the adult perspective look like? And what the later researchers have found in the 1990s up to 2000 is that as you move through life, as you move through adulthood, you get to a point where your ability to have perspective on your life increases. People are much more at peace if they have a sense of perspective on their lives. And there are whole regions of the brain that are involved in this thing called perspective taking. If you go look at scientific research, you just can't miss all the research on, did this activate the part of the brain involved in perspective taking? And so one of the directors of the Harvard Adult Development Project said the ability to shift your perspective from being in your life, which he calls the subject point of view, you are the subject, to the object point of view, where you can observe your life, is the difference between suffering and getting out of it. Because if you're able to look at your life in perspective, if you have the witness perspective, what's called in Buddhism sometimes the witness perspective on your life, you're looking at your life. You aren't enmeshed in your life. We know when we're upset, when we're overwhelmed, we're just like trapped, stuck in who we are. Once you take a breath, take a walk, talk to a friend, get some therapy, do some tapping, do some meditation, you start to see some perspective. You realize, oh, things aren't that bad. I have a lot of good things going on in my life as well. I've had a lot of victories in my life too. That bad thing isn't all who I am. And so one of the directors of the Harvard Development Project, a psychologist called Robert Keegan, said that ability to make the subject-object shift and see yourself from the witness perspective is the single biggest trigger for personal transformation and growth that there is. And so we do that when we move to those transcendent states. Now, what also happens when you do that, when you are the witness, when you are objective and you are able to see yourself from in perspective, and you then have a connection with something greater than yourself. And you might call that God, you might call it the universe, you might call it an energy field, the great global information field. The Jesuit philosopher Teilhard de Chardin call it the psychosphere or the noosphere, the sum total of all consciousness on the planet, or the consciousness of the universe. There's a lot of evidence in my book, Mind to Matter. I talk about the four forces of physics, because we know there are four forces in physics that explain the phenomena of physics as we know them today. But all of them can be shifted by an underlying force, and that force is consciousness. So our consciousness changes. And when we are able to make that subject-object shift, and then we join with a larger consciousness in ourselves, then we're bringing in information from these information sources beyond our own limited human experience and thinking. And Napoleon Hill talked about this. Albert Einstein talked about this. He said every great scientific discovery is made that way. He got his theory of relativity in a dream. So there are all these altered states that people go into that they're able to really access a universal wisdom that's not just limited to themselves. And it's powerful to do that. That starts to change your life. That's where meditation comes in. Tapping releases stress. But when you're able to sit there, do eco meditation, drop into your heart, release any triggers you have the sense of connection with something larger than yourself, then you have access to those universal states of consciousness, and you start to get super happy, and many things start to change, usually on the outside as well. So that's how the two things, meditation and tapping, work together.
Oh, good. I like to hear the concept of transcend, because transcendence for a lot of people, I mean, a lot of people will tie it to the religious belief, but then other people will tie it to using medications, let's put it this way, like mushrooms or peyote or something, some drug use. And so I'm trying to help a lot of folks who ask me about this. Can you do this without drug use? And I'm absolutely, this is a possible state that you can get into without drug use.
Yeah, I've talked to several mystics about that very question, and most of them have tried drugs. They've tried 5-MeO-DMT, they've tried psilocybin, they've tried marijuana, and they don't go back. They don't use them because they say, well, I can get there anyway. I tried psilocybin about 2 or 3 years ago, and it's like, oh, this is putting me about 2/3 of the place where I am every day anyway. So, and you look at the chemical composition of all of these substances, and you look at neurotransmitters. Basically, psilocybin is exogenous from outside the body serotonin. And so serotonin and psilocybin fit into the same receptor sites in the brain. So what you're doing is simply you're raising serotonin by having psilocybin. But you can raise serotonin naturally by meditation. Dopamine is part of the reward system, and it's the part of the brain's neurochemistry that is active in addictions like cocaine and heroin. But you get tons of dopamine when you meditate. If you meditate effectively, your dopamine can rise by up to 65%. So now here you're getting serotonin, psilocybin, you're getting dopamine, heroin, and cocaine. You're getting anandamide, which is the same molecular structure as THC, the active molecule in marijuana. And it just, I looked at say, like, for example, there's a wonderful painting from 1601 by a Renaissance master called The Ecstasy of St. Francis. And I was just staring at that painting one day and realizing, St. Francis looks stoned. And you look at some of these mystics, these Tibetan monks who are way out there, they look totally stoned. And you realize, well, they are stoned. They've had a whole lot of psilocybin and ayahuasca and all of these wonderful molecules, but they're producing them endogenously in their own lives. So if people don't have that experience, you can take a drug and you can get a glimpse, that there's there, but you can't get back there. Meditation puts you there, and then you just close your eyes, and after a while, you can go there anytime you like. So you really dispense with the need for the drugs. The drugs are helpful because they interrupt brain function, and they give you a glimpse of that. Usually, once you meditated for a while, the drugs aren't helpful because they're interrupting brain function and they're stopping you getting to those elevated states.
Yes, I've found that. With my patients that, maybe they've done a couple of rounds of ketamine, maybe they've done, some microdosing of psilocybin or done some heroes journeys. And yeah, they're like, no, I can't seem to get that repetitive result that I do with meditation, having things of that nature. So thanks for explaining that. That was a great explanation. I think that folks are really going to connect with that, because that's probably the number one question I get is, do you have to do tapping with drugs? Do you have to do, and a lot of my patients are imagining, I'm smoking weed and tapping, and it is what it is. It's society's thought process, but I want to clear that up for folks.
Also, in my book, Bliss Brain, I give you one big reason not to do drugs, and that is side effects. Yeah. Look at the side effects of ecstasy. We now have 35 years of research into ecstasy use, and the effects include cognitive decline, a decline in cognitive function, accelerated aging, heightened stress after a while, and like marijuana. I mean, marijuana, in one study of teenage boys, found that after 2 experiences of smoking marijuana, just 2 times, changes were detectable in their brain structure. And so you look at the long-term effects of marijuana use, for example, people used for pain. In the groups that don't use marijuana, their pain is less than in the groups that use marijuana over time. Look at depression research, and you see that, yeah, sure, marijuana has a temporary effect on reducing depression. Over time, the people who use it are more depressed than those that don't. So the long-term effects aren't great, and the side effects are, they're devastating. Yeah. So, accelerated aging, lowered libido, poor cell communication, degraded cell metabolism, longevity, brain shrinkage. I mean, this is getting those fixes from the outside has all those side effects. Going and getting them from the inside in meditation has none of those side effects.
And this is the thing that I think maybe society's created this kind of concept for us, is that we're thinking about looking outward and looking for that magic pill or looking for that magic herb or supplement that's going to solve things, when we have this incredibly intelligent body inside that has all the answers for us.
Absolutely. It's all there for us anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, which I find fascinating. Of course, that's why I wanted you to come on and chat. So I want to talk a little bit back to the eco meditation so folks can kind of get a little sense, but also let's tell them what they can find on the website so that they could interact and get a little sample, because I know that you can get a sample and all of those things. But I want to talk about the breathing too, because I think a lot of people are like, okay, how does it all fit together exactly? Let's go into details there.
Yeah. So what do you want to do first about how to get these resources, or?
Let's go into eco meditation first, then we'll go to the website stuff, because I think that's kind of, let's get them intrigued first. Then
well, I really struggled with meditation. I learned to meditate when I was 15 years old in a spiritual community which I joined and lived at, and my monkey mind was just so active. I couldn't meditate very easily. And I meditated sometimes, but didn't do it continuously. And I began to do it every day more than 20 years ago. So that was powerful to commit to it. But I still had a lot of mental ups and downs and couldn't really focus very well. So I looked into physiological ways of regulating your body. And what I wondered was if you added a lot of them or a number of evidence-based ones together, what would happen? So I experimented myself with doing some tapping, then doing heart coherent breathing, the quick coherence technique from HeartMath, then doing mindfulness, then doing self-hypnosis, then doing some neurofeedback, biofeedback techniques. And I found that just doing these mechanical physical techniques quickly put me into that state. It didn't really still my mind completely, but it certainly calmed it down a lot. So I put it up on the web. It's called it Eco Meditation. Now there are millions of people doing it all over the world because it's just been free ever since I put it up there about 10 years ago. And so it's just a really easy way of getting to those states. It takes about 5 minutes to do those things in order. So you do those things, and then if you're listening to one of my tracks, and there are Eco Meditation tracks free everywhere. They're on Insight Timer, they're on my website, they're on ecomeditation.com, just all over the place. You can get free Eco Meditation tracks, and you'll feel yourself drop into that relaxed, alert state. But then we do something like one of the tracks is aligning yourself with the universal energy field. So we then have some affirmations about that. Another is tuning your DNA to replicate with fidelity. So there's a track about that. There's a track for letting go of any kind of stress you have and really calming down your physical body. So there are dozens of these tracks out there. And so once you're in that state after doing these steps, you then take yourself to someplace mentally, and where you can go varies tremendously. And then what we've seen now in our clinical trials, we've done a lot of studies of eco meditation, and they show these beneficial psychological effects. But one of the cool ones was we did a randomized controlled trial using MRIs. So we had people actually lay down in an MRI, get a brain scan, then spend a month doing eco meditation once a day for 22 minutes a day. Then after a month, we put them back in the MRI and we recorded their brain activity again. And there was a control group that was doing mindful breathing. So we had these two groups of people, and we examined their brains after the 30 days, their brain scans. And we found that in the mindful breathing group, nothing happened. Their brains were the same after a month. In the eco meditation group, the part of the brain that is all self-absorbed, that is worried about you, which constructs the sense of self, that part of the brain had just dialed way down. This was like put on ice. So that suffering self part of the brain had chilled out. And the part of the brain that handles compassion was brightly lit up. It was highly active. And so two things happened to the brain. One is that the suffering self calmed down and the compassion part went way up. And that was in 30 days. So here we're seeing structural and functional changes in the brain, neurological changes in the brain. And it didn't take 10,000 hours, did not take going into the monastery, no vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, and sitting at the feet of the master for 10 years and being in a cloister. It just took a month. And there are these similar changes to what we see in Tibetan monks and nuns with 10,000 hours of practice. So we found now that this combination of these 5 techniques is really powerful, and it produces measurable changes in the structural anatomy of your brain.
Wow. That's really cool. That's really cool. And you said 22 minutes, right? Is that what I heard? 22 minutes a day?
So it was 28 days, 22 minutes a day.
And so what I get sometimes is, if I do more, is it better? am I gonna advance faster? So some of my patients will be like, can I do it twice a day? What happens if someone does it twice a day? Is it overkill?
Well, I think doing it morning and evening is good. If you prepare yourself while you're asleep, you'll probably have higher quality sleep. So that's one reason to do it before you go to sleep. And the number of people with insomnia is a number, as a percentage of the population, is really high. So it'll help you with insomnia. And so settling yourself de-stressing before you sleep is really valuable. But after a while, like, meditation, like there was a friend of mine, a neuroscientist friend of mine, was in India talking to a teacher at an ashram, and he said to him, "How often a day do you meditate?" And the teacher said, "Once a day." And my friend said, "And when is that?" And the teacher said, "All day." And
Wow.
so, you look at sculptures of the Buddha from Oriental traditions, and often he's sitting there with his eyes partially open. And so the goal of meditation initially is you close your eyes, enter these states. After a while, if you're doing it for 20, 30, 40 minutes a day and it's regular, you'll begin to open your eyes. And what we see on the EEG scans of people doing this is that they are maintaining that brainwave pattern. We call it the awakened mind pattern. They maintain awakened mind whether their eyes are open or whether their eyes are closed. And so now, every day, all day, you're in a meditative state. Now, I don't want to pretend that you reach that point and you're enlightened,
Yeah.
because you still have to meditate and you still have to tap, and there's still annoyances that come up in your life, and the dog eats your shoes, and you're you're late with a work assignment, you get a bad work evaluation, and you have an interpersonal conflict with your child or your parent or your wife or your team member. I mean, all the stuff of daily life still happens, but you have a sense of equanimity, and it doesn't really bother you nearly as much as it used to. You aren't triggered the way you used to be, and if you get triggered, you just tap. So you wind up having a much, much smoother and happier life. And this is one of the really hard things for me to do as a science writer, because, Jannine, what I find is that I need analogies and a way to explain these things to people. And it's really hard to explain this to people. But the amount of happy brain activity we see in people who are long-term meditators is orders of magnitude bigger than the happiest people who aren't doing that. And how big? Between 7 times in some studies to 25 times in others. So imagine that the happiest person you know, and then 25xing that.
Wow.
And the degree of bliss that these people are in. I mean, the reason they look stoned is that they are. The reason that they look, the Rumi is just writing these ecstatic, miraculous pieces of poetry, is that they're in seriously altered states. And you get so happy. Like, I mean, I was walking just through the park the other day. I just began to cry. I walked, I just started crying, watching my feet, just being grateful for feet and grateful for breath. I'm so grateful for breath, air, feet, and the park that I was just weeping with gratitude. It didn't take a new car or a new house or a raise or a promotion. It just took breathing.
Yeah.
You are so crazy happy, you can't believe it. So the benefit of this is just extraordinary in terms of your psychological happiness state.
Hmm. That sounds wonderful. I want to get to that state. So I'm hearing 28 days where you go through the series. And then at 28 days, I'm guessing that there's an altered state, because you've said that the MRIs do show that the brain will stay. And then at that 28-day stage, is there a maintenance program that folks would look at? Or, because let's put it this way. I hear a lot of people who like to check boxes. I may or may not be one of those people. And when I get my 28 days checked, now I'm like, okay, I'm good. Now what? Or I'm good forever. So what's the next step for folks after they get past those 28 days?
There was a woman in one of my live workshops in 2019. She was a psychotherapist, and I chatted with her during one of the breaks, and she said, I made a commitment to doing eco meditation every single day for 30 days. And I said, that's great to have that level of commitment. And well, what day are you on right now? She said, I'm on day 147.
Wow.
When you start to enter bliss brain, when you start to feel that good, when you start to have that as your baseline of well-being every day, what happens is really interesting. People enter this space that another fellow researcher, a friend of mine, calls fundamental well-being. And you, at a certain point, you've built enough neurological tissue in these circuits of joy and resilience and creativity to where you make a flip. The flip happens, and you have that subject-object perspective. You are in transcendence. That is your the new place you live, and you don't go back. People have made that switch. A very small number of them, something tragic happens and they drop back. Most of them go there and they stay there. And what happens after 30 days is that you are so addicted to feeling good. Now, again, bear in mind, I mean, dopamine, this is a seriously addictive chemical. Serotonin, you start feeling that good, you don't want to go back to feeling bad again. Anandamide, the bliss molecule, the same one as THC in marijuana, you want to feel that good every day. So after 30 days, you just keep going. And people then often want to broaden and deepen the meditation practice. And then we actually have a whole program called the Short Path to Oneness. And we've broken the developmental journey into 36 what we call milestones there. And you go from milestone to milestone to milestone. Eventually, you get to some pretty altered states. We have people who are doing the short path talk about starting to see past lives or be able to see what people are thinking or have experiences like one woman says, I saw my own death and I remained totally calm and it seemed beautiful to me. Others become super compassionate, including people who abuse them, maybe as children. So people start to have these real psychological changes, but they aren't always permanent. So they go from one to another. One of those milestones, for example, is solitude. So you hit milestone 22, you really crave being alone, but only for a little while. And then you want to re-engage with other people. So you had another milestone and come back. But we've now begun to map these advanced phases of human development. And so after the 30 days, eventually it'll become 30 months. You'll be changing. Your whole outlook on life is changing. The whole way you perceive yourself in the world is changing. You now are living out there in a body. You're now aware that your consciousness, you are that universal consciousness. Rumi said that we aren't a drop of the ocean of consciousness. We are the ocean of consciousness in a drop. And so you live your life and realize that this body is like an avatar I'm pushing around my screen. It's just this chess piece I'm moving around the board. I am the universe moving these chess pieces around, and you live that way. And it's a radically different experience from the way you were before. And also, it's something you never regress from. You want to just keep on moving to those states, staying in those states. Eventually, your body gets old, you die, and then you just are in that consciousness all the time. So, in terms of what happens after 30 days, you're just getting started. By that time, you are so addicted, it's unlikely you'll stop.
I can imagine that. I mean, if we look at dopamine, right, and we look at most people are looking for dopamine hits wherever they can get them. And in the realm of a lot of my population of folks that listen to this podcast, we have folks who are in perimenopause, menopause, starting to notice changes with their hormones. A lot of times there's stress eating going on. A lot of times there's wine drinking to cope and a lot of coping mechanisms. So it seems to me that this would kind of fit in to help us to cope better with some of life's things and then to transcend beyond it, of course, as the ultimate goal.
So you still have those things. Your body changes, you age. Those things are just part of being human. But when you have that transcendent perspective, when you made that subject-object shift, you see your body going through those things. You see your mind going through those things. Like, for example, one of my big challenges in my life is I was raised as a fundamentalist Christian, and that community was very, very judgmental. And I had a very difficult time weaning myself from being judgmental. And I still am judgmental sometimes about some people and about some things, about events in the world. But now it's like I'm out there saying, oh, that I'm looking at this guy, Dawson Church, as just having a judgmental thought. I'm not all invested in it. I'm not all emotional about it. Your body changes as you age. But you, again, just accept those body changes. My wife is in her early 70s. And so she's having to, just readjust to having the body she has. But she is just, as she does that, just the essence and that consciousness shining out from her is just transforming her body. And so she's this absolutely radiant, woman in her 70s, just remarkable to relate to her. When I close my eyes and sleep with her, when I'm lying with her at night, I close my eyes and lie next to her, I feel this amazing presence of this being next to me. So you fall more and more in love with your husband, your wife, your children. You're less reactive, you're more accepting, you're more compassionate. You still have boundaries, you still have to do all the things you did before, but again, it really transforms your life, and you realize you aren't the body, and you have such compassion on the body. What that also does is that lowers your cortisol. We found in one study that people doing eco meditation at a weekend retreat had a 24% drop in cortisol. Now, all kinds of good things start to happen when that happens. You age much more slowly. In fact, when people discover how old some of the people in this field are, they're amazed. There's a YouTube video of a Tai Chi master doing Tai Chi at the age of 114 with
Wow.
full range of motion. This guy standing on one leg is balancing. He has full range of motion in all his arms and shoulders. And that's 114. I mean, so it's not like you have to buy the narrative that you're going to decline and then become a shriveled up old husk and then have a miserable long descent into dementia and death. So, I mean, these people tend to be very cognitively active and really really happy, and then if you look at them too, they decline and die when their bodies die. It happens really really fast. They're okay. They're chopping wood and carrying water. Then on a Monday, Tuesday they slow down. Thursday their body dies. So we do not see the kind of long descent into degenerative disease that is so common in Western cultures. And it's powerful to look at these models and realize that, my body's changing. I'm 45 years old, my body's changing. Am I changing? I mean, one great sage, Ramana Maharshi, said, he was asked, are you in pain? Because he had cancer near the end of his life. And he said, I'm not in pain. My body's in pain. I'm not in pain. You understand the difference between the two. You aren't all enmeshed in the body. And that is so liberating to have that experience.
Wow. I mean, as we get older, that is something that I want to have a long, lovely life, and I think for a lot of people, we want to be able to embrace, aging and slow it down whenever we can. And the concept of we don't have to age like our ancestors, or we don't have to age like what it looks like, on TV. We actually can, prolong and have a happier life and lower the cortisol over time. I mean, it's awesome. I don't think, anyone's gonna, if you guys are thinking that we're crazy here, no way. This is good stuff here. I love it. Love it. All right. So let's tell folks where they can find the website. So EFT Universe, and like all of the different resources that they can find on there that you want to highlight for them to look at, because I know we had talked about the trainings too that are going to be launching in March as this podcast is going to be released. Let's talk about what they can find for anybody that just wants to get more information, to someone that's like, sign me up. I want to transcend and have amazing. I want to do Tai Chi at 114, like you mentioned. That's what I'm going for.
Yeah, and have all of my wits about me.
Yeah.
So one quick and easy entry point is the website tapping, just like EFT tapping, tappinggift.com. And that's where you get a version of eco meditation that focuses on immunity, and also the EFT mini manual for free. So you get that, and then puts you into EFT Universe. Through that portal, you'll see our practitioners. We have classes. We have like half-day classes, full-day classes. We have a 4 or 5 day training that's either live at places like Omega and Kripalu, or you can do it virtually if you want to. You can do it anywhere in the world if you want to do it in different time zones. That's a basic 4 day training in learning the key EFT techniques. And so that's one resource. There's also certification. You can get certified. It takes a year to get certified in EFT, but a mentor works with you, looks at your cases, and helps you develop as a really excellent EFT practitioner. So you can use a practitioner if you're stressed or if you're upset. Use a practitioner. We have an app called Stress Solution. You go on Stress Solution. It's also available on desktop at mystresssolution.com. You go to Stress Solution and you can tap live in real time with a practitioner whenever you want. So when you're stressed or when you're upset or when you're triggered, then you just go on Stress Solution and you you tap with somebody right there, then and then on the video screen. So there are lots of ways of getting EFT, using EFT, that apply it in your life, and then meditate first thing in the morning. Just download the free eco meditation track, use it, listen to it, and see where you go in 30 days. The chances are very high you'll want to keep on doing more.
I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it. I'm already addicted, and it's probably like 6 weeks. I've been every day on it, and that's just regular tapping, right? I haven't even done the eco meditation, and by the time I finish this podcast goes out, I will have, of course. And because I've got some time, I might even be able to get 28 days in and give folks a little brief overview of it by the end of the time. So I'm hoping that will happen. So, oh my goodness, Dawson, thank you so much. This is just such great information and a lot of stuff that I think will be really resonant with folks. Let's put it that way.
I'm so glad you're sharing this with them. Thank you. Thanks for your journey and sharing where you are too. And I have a sense it's just beginning.
Yeah, I think so too. I think so too. Hey, fellow health junkie, thanks for listening to the Health Fix podcast. If you enjoyed tuning in, please help support me to get the word out about the podcast. Subscribe, rate, and review, and just get that word out. Thanks again for listening.